Welcome to the Golden State Association of Christian Schools Catalyst Session. And this is part 3 of a series that we are doing on helping teachers help students who struggle. I have Dr. Donna Bergman with me today, and we introduced her in our first series, but let me share with you a little bit more about Donna and her education. She has extensive experience in the field of education. What I love about Dr. Bergman is that she has experience at the K-12 level, at the college level, at the graduate and seminary levels. And so I have asked her to come and share with us from the expert, as it were, side of things to help us layman teachers better understand how we can help children who struggle. Some, it may be a disability, a learning disability. Others, it may be actually more severe special needs. And so today, our third part in this series, we're going to focus in on helping administrators. Once we actually have a student who may need special education, what do we do as administrators? And so I've asked Dr. Bergman to come and kind of give us an overview of it, and then I'm going to ask her specific questions that I hope will draw everyone toward understanding the steps needed to help these students. So Dr. Bergman, what would be some of the things with special education, kind of that overview of provisions that we need to share with our children?
Right. Special education actually just has one federal law, and that's IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And it specifies the specific services and delivery of instruction that is needed for students with disabilities, and it has all the legal ramifications in there. The main premise of it is FAPE, Free and Appropriate Public Education. Since there are students that qualify for IDEA, but then there are others that don't, there's another law that we think of when we talk about special education, but it actually is an anti-discrimination law, and it's Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And that applies not only to children with disabilities that qualify for IDEA, but a much broader scope of other disabilities, temporary disabilities, disabilities that just don't fit one of the 13 categories.
Okay, so in this, well, the acronyms that we need to keep in mind, IDEA, and then the FAPE, and then our 504 plan.
Right.
And so those are the three that you're going to try to keep in mind. We're going to share a couple other acronyms like ISP and different things, but I'll try to make mention of those acronyms so that it's something you could look up if ever you needed more information on it. So tell me, what does it mean to be eligible for special education?
Okay, and I realized I should have mentioned one other thing. Is it okay if I go back?
Oh, sure, sure.
Okay. Child Find is a part of IDEA, and it's a mandate for districts, for local education agencies to find any child that has a disability that would make them eligible for special education. And of course, they don't know that until they evaluate the child. But any child that resides in their district, and they will find out from pediatricians, from parents, but they have to provide evaluation. They have to identify the child and then provide evaluation of any child that's suspected of having a disability.
So if a private school gets a email or a letter from the school district in their area asking for information about possible needs for services, that's what they are doing. They're finding or following that child find law to try to gather that information and report it.
Yes, that's correct.
As a private school, it would be good for me to participate in that child find endeavor. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. Even if you don't have any children at the present time that need assistance, you may in the future. And I think everything you can do to establish a good relationship with the public school system is to your advantage, because there are going to be times that the two of you have to work together to meet the needs of students.
Okay, that's very helpful here. So let's go back to our 13 categories. What does it mean to be eligible for special education?
To be eligible for special education, the student has to have one of the 13 categories. There are other disabilities that a child might have, but these are the 13 that are actually specified in the law as being part of special education. So they have to have one of those 13 disabilities. They cannot, their learning problems can't be caused by the environment, family situations, low socioeconomic, English as a second language, or an actual visual or hearing problem, unless you're looking at deaf and blind. But as far as the others, if they need glasses, that doesn't qualify them for one of the other categories.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, they have to not be performing at grade level in the classroom. They can't be they have difficulty accessing the curriculum. When given regular instruction, they just don't seem to be able to learn. And so they're in need of something beyond what is being done in the general classroom. And the other thing is that it requires a formal evaluation. So a teacher can't just say, oh, I have a child that I think has a learning disability, so we need to get services. The school district will actually do a formal evaluation.
So not only do they have to be in one of the 13 categories, which, by the way, we covered those 13 categories in Series 1 of these Catalyst sessions right here, but not only do they have to be part of the 13, but they also have to be falling behind.
Yes.
In order to move on. So where would a child go to get an evaluation?
Actually, it has to be initiated by a parent, or it could be an educational institution. The school could refer them, but it's usually done by the parent, and because they go to the district of residence. Many of our schools are in one district, but the local school for the child would be a different district. So they have to go to the local school, the resident school, and request an evaluation. When they do that, the person in the office that they're talking to will take specific information about what the problem is, so that they have an idea what sort of assessment to do. And when they know what type of assessment, and they will write up a consent for evaluation form, a written consent, and the the school district will fill in all of the assessments that they think the child might need. That doesn't mean that they will give all those assessments. Okay. They may have, like for a teenager, they might just put in something about depression, an assessment that would identify depression. And then when they begin working with the child, they realize that's not necessary. Okay. But if they don't have it listed on the form, they have to go back and redo the form. So they list any assessments that they think would be necessary. And it's by law, they have to do multiple assessments. They can't just identify a child with an IQ test or something like that. Okay. And so the parent gets this form, and they have to, once they've requested it, the district has 10 days to give them that form. When they sign it, then the district has 60 days to evaluate the child for special education to see if they're eligible.
Okay, that's very helpful here as we move forward, and especially understanding the parent's role in this, that it doesn't have to be the entire burden of this private school to get these services. They can work in conjunction with parents on that.
It is helpful, though, for the school to explain to the parents that this is the law, that the school district has to provide it. Because sometimes a school district will say, well, maybe you need to do more of this or that, and they have to really be willing to stand up and say, my child needs an evaluation.
So what can we expect in those assessments?
Okay, the assessments vary, of course, with the disability. Some of the disabilities require a medical diagnosis before the school can proceed. Others, they do not. The most common disability is the specific learning disability. And for that particular one, they would do an intelligence test. They would do an achievement test, and they'd be looking for strengths and weaknesses and a disconnect, so that if the child has average or above average intelligence but isn't performing where they should be as far as their achievement scores, or even achievement in one area like just reading or just math, there's an unexplained discrepancy.
Right.
We no longer use the discrepancy formula. That used to be a way to identify them, but now we're looking more for patterns of strengths and weaknesses.
Okay.
And then there's various tests depending on whether you're looking at autism or whether you're looking at behavior and emotional disability or cognitive impairments. It's a different battery of tests, and once they do those tests, then the team will meet to discuss the findings.
So the team, is this what we're talking about when we get into IEPs?
Yes.
IEP. Okay, so explain to me the team.
Okay, the team consists of anyone that has done part of the evaluation,
Okay.
and usually there's a school psychologist involved just because that's their training. And so they would be the one responsible for sort of guiding the presentation of the data. But you have the data from the formal evaluations. You have to have a general ed teacher and a special ed teacher present. You have to have someone from the district that can allocate funds, which might be, in this case, it's probably going to be an administrator, but it can also be the special ed teacher might be the person.
Okay.
You have anyone with related information. The parents can bring in anyone that they feel might be helpful. Maybe they've had some services for the child that they want that person to report. Maybe they've had counseling or something like that. Anyone that they want to invite, they can bring an advocate if they want, but the parent must attend. And the law says that they're equal partners, so it's not a matter that the school district is dictating this is what's going to happen. They should be finding out information from the parents. The parents would have already provided a developmental history and any medical records, but they may be asked for more information at the meeting. And then anyone connected with the private school that will be delivering services should attend. That would be the teacher. If there's special teachers, like maybe a special PE teacher or someone like that, they should attend. But definitely an administrator for this first meeting. It doesn't have to be the principal if it's a larger school and there's someone else that's working more directly with the student, but you definitely want the public school to be represented at this meeting. I'm sorry, yes, the private school.
So the regular school teacher, special ed teacher, those could be in the public school.
Yes.
So the parent and administrator should be bringing in some teachers that would be working with that child directly.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is a big team.
Yes,
could be
it is.
a pretty large team.
It could be, and then oftentimes the records are reviewed annually, the IEP or the ISP. So then it might not be as large because in some cases you're just really continuing new goals, new objectives, but you're continuing along the same path.
Okay. So this is getting us into the next acronym, ISP.
Yes.
What does IEP stand for?
Individual Education Program.
And then what does ISP stand for?
Individualized Service Plan.
Okay, so that kind of gives you a hint that this team, we're trying to come up with a big education, kind of a broad plan. And then here with the service plan, it gets into a little bit more specifics of the services that will be provided. So what would be some of those services that could be provided?
Okay. The public school, according to the law, is to provide services comparable to the IEP. But we find that, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, we find that usually it does not include instructional services. The IEP, of course, would dictate what is being done in the classroom, what the goals and objectives are. But for the ISP, the parents have their child in a Christian school because that's the quality and the type of education they want. So they don't usually do the direct classroom instruction. I have run across situations where they have provided resource instruction, but again, most districts are not going to do that.
Right.
But the common things are speech and language. That's probably the biggest provision. They can also provide physical therapy, occupational therapy, assistive technology. And with assistive technology, it might just be that you need some adaptation for a computer so that the child can use it in an easier manner.
Right.
So they do provide that. They also should, at this ISP meeting, and the teachers should get together, and from the data that they have in the evaluation, they should be able to come up with strategies and specific areas of need that they can work on, so that the private school teacher and the public school, especially special ed teacher, can come up with a plan, even though they're not going to dictate that in the ISP. It will help the private school teacher know what to do, and they should be a resource for them.
Sure, right. Offering strategies and ideas to deal with that. What would be some basic information related to ISP? Like, we know lots of people are attending the IEP. Does it narrow in with the ongoing ISP process? Usually
it would still, unless there's new assessment data. And normally with an IEP, it's reevaluated with a full evaluation every 3 years. And that's going to probably carry over for the ISP, and I say probably because sometimes it's waived, but it has to be with the parent's approval that it's waived. And so they can do another assessment, and then you may have more people involved. But if it's an annual meeting, you're probably just going to have a special ed teacher, a general ed teacher, and then the people from the Christian school.
Okay, that's very helpful here. So what if a child does not qualify for special education, but has a disability? There are needs that need to be addressed. What's next for them?
Okay, the other piece is the 504 plan, which is what I mentioned. It's much broader. There's no funding. It does not provide any specific services. It only provides accommodations. But I say only because accommodations are critical.
Right.
And the thing is that these accommodations, once they're in the plan, the teachers have to allow those accommodations. But the nice thing is that the 504 plan or an IEP follows the child to college or to the workplace, but it's not in the IEP then changes to a 504. And so, because all they can get once they graduate is accommodations, but those accommodations can be very broad. I think the most common one is voice to text and text to voice, so they're getting their information audibly and they're able to dictate what they want into a computer and have it printed.
You mentioned there that once they graduate 12th grade, the services for the IDEA are no longer in play. Is that correct?
That's correct, when they graduate. Now, for a severely impaired child, if they can age out rather than graduate at age 21, and in some cases, the state has further services, but that's the norm.
Okay. So is there any other information that would be helpful as we conclude this section right here of helping administrators kind of weed through, navigate the help that they need to, or I should say, help them navigate through how to help a child get the services they need?
I just would like to mention that on the standardized tests that most Christian schools give, that the children with an accommodation plan or an ISP can have the accommodations that are mentioned in their plans allowed for the standardized test. There are, on most state websites, there's a list of standard accommodations. So you can't go out on something really bizarre, but
Right.
the standard accommodations are pretty broad.
Okay.
And so it's things like being able to take their test in a private location, being able to have the instructions read to them. Now, if it's a reading test, they can't read it
Obviously,
to them.
right.
But the instructions, they can have the instructions reworded. They can give the instructions back to the proctor so that,
Okay.
that they know that they understand. They don't have to use a Scantron.
Okay.
Or they can have someone else mark the
Mark it
scan
for them.
Yes. So there's just things that make it possible for them to be able to show their knowledge without these hindrances that they would normally encounter.
Well, this has been very helpful, and this is the most recent up-to-date information from our U.S. Department of Education, and I'm very thankful that Dr. Bergman is here to help us understand it all. Thank you.